All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 23rd of April, 2025, and this is the SIG Cloud Provider office hours. SIG Cloud Provider is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can basically be summarized as please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on. Okay, so I would invite everyone to add themselves to the attending list here if they would like to. Thank you, Joel, for helping out here. We have a preponderance of Red Hatters in the audience today. Um, and I'm going to skip over. We'll come back to the bug scrub and triage at the end because we have a bunch of agenda items to go through. But first, just in case, are there any sub projects here that would like to give an update that may not be on the agenda so far? Okay, not seeing any hands going up or anything, so we will move on. Okay, the first item on our agenda, Bridget added this. I will read it out here. So in recognition of the excellent work he's already been doing, and in anticipation of further great technical leadership, myself and Bridget would like to nominate Joel Speed to join SIG Cloud Provider as one of our technical leads. So Joel will, join myself and Bridget and Walter and kind of work with us to set technical direction for the SIG. And we wanted to bring this up here first, and we'll also send an email to kind of confirm it or at least accept votes and whatnot. So I don't know if anybody has any comments on that or questions or, I guess objections or or whatever. Um, but yeah, any comments on that or are people looking forward to the email at this point? Okay, I will take silence as a resounding majority that everybody wants this. And so, Joel, we just have to put the email up and give it like a 1 week, 1 week consensus period, and then we should be able to add you as a tech lead. So that will be very cool. Okay, and getting into more technical stuff, then we'll get on to the next two topics. So I added the topic here about coordination of provider-specific instance hardware. And this is something that Hemant and I have been talking about, and Hemant is on the call. Thank you for joining us. And I know this is probably something also that Philip Kshipinski is also interested in as he's been leading the working group node lifecycle stuff. But Hemant and I have been having a discussion that started based on the autoscaler and the notion of being able to detect when a CSI driver has actually been installed on a node or when a node is expecting it. But this is also a problem that comes up for nodes that might have graphics processors on them or other types of specialized hardware that might be used, um, in conjunction with a driver that needs to be installed. And so, I wanted to bring the discussion here because one of the things that has come up, I think, in several places, not just here, but also in the Node SIG discussions, and probably this will come up in the Node Lifecycle Working Group discussions as well, is the notion of, who should be responsible and how should we advertise that there could be, some sort of hardware on an instance or that an instance has hardware that might become available later. And, one of the things that I think Kuba from SIG Autoscaling had talked about was the notion of some sort of condition or something. I think there's probably a lot of design work that still needs to be done to make this happen. And I'm guessing that the Node Lifecycle Working Group will probably be the place to have these conversations. But when Hemant and I were talking about this, the more we talked about it, and the more we talked about the notion of, how can we make this more automated for users so that, like a user isn't responsible for having to, specifically mark, this node will have a GPU on it, this node will have storage on it. And one of the discussion points that we kind of went into was that, the cloud providers know information about instances before those instances will become nodes. And so I think, we as a SIG should be aware of this this need within the Kubernetes user community. And I think we should be involved in the discussion because, for example, if we have if there's a certain instance type on a certain cloud provider that is known to have a GPU associated with it, for example, the cloud provider could very well be the one that adds a taint or a label or a condition or whatever it ends up being to the node. And this may be something that we see as an expansion of the cloud controller manager responsibility, because what this gives other tooling the opportunity to do, and this is most seen, I think, with the autoscalers, is that it allows something like the autoscaler to know that hardware will eventually be here, and we shouldn't make extras of things before scheduling occurs. And this is a big issue with also the CSI nodes and storage associated with that, because you won't know ahead of time what storage might arrive there, but a cloud provider might have intimate knowledge of that. So I wanted to bring the topic up for discussion here. And I think, again, I think the Node Lifecycle Working Group will probably be the place to have the real, kind of in-depth technical discussion. But yeah, I wanted to open the floor up and see if anybody had kind of thoughts or questions or comments about this.
So I will step in. Sorry, I got here late, so I didn't hear the beginning, Elmiko, but I heard the end. And one thing I would say is, if anyone is interested in this, this is sounds a lot like the problem DRA is trying to solve. And I've gone ahead and dropped in the chat a link to the DRA, which just went beta with 132.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, and you are absolutely right. This is something that the DRA, folks have also been, working on as well. And I think that I have a feeling that we're probably going to need to solve this together in um, in I'm guessing the Node Lifecycle Working Group is probably where a lot of this will come together. Um, but yeah, like I've looked at a little bit of the dynamic resource stuff. Like if we need to draft on kind of like what they're doing, that makes sense. I think there's going to be a need to have this go wider than just the DRA stuff, because it sounds like this is going to be really important for storage as well. And we might need to figure out, is there a way to help this out, for storage and for other things too that aren't necessarily DRA specific.
So
Well, I think that's a fair point. I will say, having worked with a bunch of the DRA folks, like they're kind of focused on GPU, TPU problems right now. But the vision that they always give me includes a lot more than just processor types. It usually includes other kinds of resources as well, which is in fact why they talk about, resource claim rather than like processor claim. But having said that, like, don't get me wrong, I think we absolutely do need to be involved in this. And in fact, examples of this, I mean, one of the things they talk about is, sorry, going too far into the weeds, but is things like, what are TPU equivalents and how is their TPU equivalence code going to work? And I have a feeling that one of the things you're going to find is, for instance, I believe that my employer may have its own custom TPU type, which some customers use. And that if you're going to start getting into TPU equivalence, then you're going to need a TPU equivalence test. And if my employer and your employer each have their own kinds of TPUs and their own equivalents, that means that we're going to need their own tests. And at that point, I think we're going right back into one of your favorite subjects, Elmiko, which is how do we do that kind of testing, which is very much, cloud provider specific tests.
Yeah. Hemant, did you want to make a comment too? I saw you on
yeah, no, as someone who is not familiar with because I come from storage team and it's I'm not super familiar with DRA. So like, is there a notion of waiting for resources? Like I saw some code in cluster storage autoscaler about DRA, but it still had like the GPU waiting and things. So is there anything here that says, okay, this node shouldn't be considered ready or shouldn't be considered ready for scheduling certain kind of workloads until it has, like a certain driver installed, be it a CSI driver or a GPU driver. Is there a notion of that idea captured in DRA?
That is a great question, and unfortunately, I'm not sure that we're the right ones to answer it. My impression is that even GPUs frequently can take 10 or 20 seconds for the driver to be installed, and as such, they would need it, because I have certainly talked to the DRO folks, and this is like GPU driver install time is a problem that they have talked to me about. But I've never actually specifically asked the question you're asking. I just assume that it must be, but you know what they say about assumptions.
So, yeah, I mean, like, I do not, I think, like, and we're kind of getting sidetracked here, I'm afraid. Like, if we do not have, like, I'm afraid that we'll have to solve it at the either cloud level, or there's another proposal that yesterday Mike linked me from, that I think was that node lifecycle, where they're trying to implement a generic proposal for waiting for the resources that kubelet must wait for the to be ready before it reports as ready. So there was this another proposal, right? And that you linked yesterday. So we'll have to look at those problems, like, and I don't want to, like, I have read DRH a little bit, and I haven't seen any notion of, like, waiting for anything that we're trying to the solve here. And yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
I think DRA too is like actually a subset of the problem that we're talking about, right? Like DRA is using a very well organized API to handle the coordination of like how do you claim something, and then how do you get scheduled to where that thing is happening. But I think what we're talking about is actually a superset of that, which is like, you know, for any node that may have hardware on it that takes some amount of time to initialize after the node has become ready, right? We
correct.
need a mechanism to coordinate that handoff, right? And so whether that's DRA available hardware that might eventually be on the node, or whether that's a GPU that's on the node to begin with and just needs to have a driver installed, or whether it's something else like CSI that could be attached there. The reason
Yeah.
why I wanted to bring the conversation to this SIG is because one of the things that the cloud controller managers can do that I think other components in a Kubernetes cluster are not necessarily responsible for is having an intimate understanding of what the specific cloud provider that the cluster is running on can be aware of. And one of the really difficult parts to this problem that, Hemant and I have been talking about is, when you start a node, when the kubelet starts running, how could I, as a user or a developer of a day two Kubernetes application, how could I know that that node has hardware on it that will take extra time to initialize? Because the kubelet will become ready, and later its capacity could be updated to indicate that it has this hardware that took time to initialize. And one of the things that occurred during our conversations, was that, or one of the things we became aware of, is that one possible location for this, aside from the user supplying it, is that the cloud controllers will have intimate knowledge of what is coming up in the cluster as a node. And so there, like we do today with adding zonal and regional kind of information to the nodes after they've started, we've already established a pattern for cloud providers to be able to update the metadata of nodes with information that might not be able to be acquired in other places. And so it sounded like a problem that was similar to some other things, that we've discussed here before. So I would love to hear this kind of like in relation to the DRA stuff. And I think, probably we're going to have more discussions about this in the future. and I'm hoping that the node lifecycle working group will be one of the places that we talk about this.
Yeah, I agree. So from our storage perspective, the problem is that when a node is ready, reports is ready, like, and we don't know what CSI driver will be available on that. The kubelet in itself doesn't know what CSI driver will be installed or available on this. So it just reports ready before anything comes up. And what happens then is then the scheduler considers that node ready node as, okay, I can send pods with that use volumes on that node. And it sends them and they all get stuck. Or when the storage comes up, then okay, some of them get scheduled, but some of them other pods get stuck because the volume that are available on the node cannot support that many pods. So that's the problem we are trying to solve. Sorry.
Okay, Walter, you're up first, and then Philip.
Yeah, first thing I'd say is no, I don't think there's any need for an apology. I think that's a great point to bring up. But the other thing I would say on this is I think the other interesting DRA version of this is that while you're waiting for something like the GPU and the GPU driver to be ready on the node, the thing the customer almost certainly doesn't want is a bunch of random workloads going to a much more expensive node, right? They want the right workloads going to that node because the reason they're paying for that GPU is that that node is one of the few that can efficiently do that work. And so I think it definitely is a place we should have the conversation. It would be interesting to understand if your workloads are similar in that you want to get the right workload there, or right. I think this is a very interesting and deep topic, and I think we need to make sure we're having those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Walter. Philip, please.
Hey, so I'm not completely up to date on this node readiness effort. Just like from first look, I have a couple of points there. So like what you also said, like to me the node readiness and the readiness gates they sound to one-dimensional. So like we have a lot of requirements for pods, and even the timing is different. So like when the node starts, maybe you want some daemon sets to come up, and maybe not all of them at the same time. And then even during the like the normal operations, some resources might be available for some pods and not for others. So I feel like the topic is quite big. I will also send to the chat. Was this effort where we had problems with scheduling pods on nodes that like did not have the CTL requirements on the node, and basically we would get a infinite feedback loop. So there was this proposal to actually have like some pre-scheduling state that the kubelet could actually let the scheduler know that it will not accept this pod. So, and there is also the issue of like pod priority. I don't know if this was discussed before in this. So like maybe it might also be like this might also be a point to consider, like if we want to include the pod priority in starting the node. I know like this is also like there is like strict ordering in the priority, which we also might not have always. So yeah, I like even like if the node readiness or the readiness gates will not come up as proposed, I think it's like a very good idea to like a good area to explore this, and even like a starter cap, and maybe it will get somewhere.
I think that's really great to mention the pod scheduling part of this, because that is a big part of the issue here. I think for this SIG's kind of purview though, I think we don't necessarily need to get in the middle of kind of like the scheduling and those kind of things. I think one of the things that we can do as a SIG is help to add into the metadata that other parts of Kubernetes will use, right? And I think that's really one of our big contributions here could be because I came to this problem based on auto scaling stuff, right? And the auto scaler is like a day two application that is running on top of Kubernetes, right? But it needs to know certain things. And so, like the very concrete problem that came up in the auto scaler, and this was solved, years ago with a hack that allows users to like kind of manipulate the data. And that is that, if the auto scaler sees a node and that node says it has a GPU on it, the autoscaler says, all right, well, make me another one of those nodes. And the node becomes ready, but there's no GPU on it yet. So what ended up happening was the autoscaler would keep making those nodes until eventually one of them, through timing, the driver got installed and pods were able to start being scheduled. But by then, all these other expensive nodes had been created, right? So I think what we can probably lend to help from the SIG position is not necessarily taking a strong stance on how this information should be consumed or how scheduling should be affected by it. But I think given that we sit at a layer where we will have extra knowledge about instances that might be coming into a cluster, that there might be an opportunity to provide more metadata than that other tools could use to make the situation better. And I think that's really I think that's going to be a big part of why like SIG Cloud Provider might want to be involved in this. And so that's kind of like a lot of the reason why I wanted to bring it here for discussion as well.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, that I feel like that's what's mostly missing in many areas is to have like a well-structured data that like different components can depend on. And in this case, this would be like a kubelet and scheduler that could this would be very important for them to have this information, and they can then use it and decide what to do, like with regard to scheduling or the daemon set controller. And so yeah, like if we could like get inspiration also from DRA or see how that plays there as well, it would be nice. So for sure, like I think like having like the input from all the parties that basically would use this from like each side, like that's very important.
Yeah. And to the extent that this crosses over into DRA as well, right? Like a cloud provider is going to know if the hardware is even available to have DRA on it, right? So there might be cases where even before the DRA mechanisms have come into play, before the DRA APIs have come into play, there might be a way for the cloud controller to denote that a certain node even has the availability to have DRA things on it. And that information would also be useful to other day two tools, right? Because they could look at a node and say, oh, there's some metadata on here that allows me to know that this node could have DRA on it in the future, or it could have a certain type of storage on it, or a certain type of GPU or TPU or whatever. So these are the kind of problems that I'm interested in seeing like contribution from this SIG on. I think that that's where like a lot of meaningful discussion could be had. Um, does anybody else have questions or comments around this topic?
So,
Okay. Oh, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Ahmad.
Like, yeah. So, like from I apologize for this, but my storage team concerns are basically more immediate, and I get the sense that this is gonna if we include like the more scope we try to cover with the topic, the more uh, like gargantum the discussion around that becomes, and the harder it is to arrive on a conclusion, and like to and to develop something concrete actually and ship it to real users. So from that perspective, like I know that the Azure and AWS cloud providers already have a way to, like, when they start a node, they apply a taint. Now, it could be that it is proprietary, part of the proprietary AKS and EKS corresponding code, like where the taint, like they taint the node with disk.csi. I have linked the code in the chat that says that this node is this node starts with the taint disk.csi.azure.sn, is it not ready, value no execute. So that means the node is ready, but it has the taint. Anything that doesn't wants to run that on that taint has to tolerate the taint until, and when the CSI driver starts on that node, then it removes the taint. So that is another kind of hacky mechanism that is being used for node readiness. And I want to bring this up because this kind of falls into like the purview of like the cloud controller managers, and having like each cloud provider do its own thing. It's kind of not maybe it may be better if we can standardize around this and come up with a mechanism of defining, like for example, like what me and Mike were talking about. Cloud control manager can define like, okay, this node running on AWS will come up with these CSI drivers. Like like AWS, it could be Azure, EBS and EFS driver, and Azure, it could be Azure Disk and Azure File driver. And then we can, any like component like cluster autoscaler or scheduler that wants to use that node can be cognizant of that before scheduling pods to it. So in my mind, that's much narrower scope and doable within a release. There's a certain risk to getting like trying to capture. I don't know if that'll be acceptable to the SIG, but there's obviously certain risk of trying to getting too many things on board, and then we will have struggle with coming with the conclusion. But I don't know if that's the way we should go, but I just want to bring that concern.
Yeah, please, Walter.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw history lesson, maybe time. I apologize. I'm going into history. I'm gonna, yeah. If we go looking way back, like 107, 108, the storage code was split off actually before any of the rest of the cloud provider code. And all of the, and for varying reasons, I think the original excuse was that while there are specific cloud provider storage types, there are also very other kinds of storage types like NFS. And the idea was that cloud provider specific storage types are just one part of a larger class that was other kinds of storage that, you know, some of what you could optionally determine what kinds of storage a given Kubernetes cluster happens to support. And so the storage, SIG storage back then felt like this was just part of that kind of more generic stuff. And so when cloud providers, it was before it was even a SIG, when it was just a working group, you know, we created the cloud provider interface. We always sort of we knew there was cloud provider specific stuff over in storage, but we always sort of left it separate and left it to the storage team. Fast forward to when we're actually trying to get rid of all of the cloud provider specific code from the KK. I and the other cloud providers teams went to Saad Ali, Michelle Au, and the other SIG storage leads and went, hey guys, we're trying to get rid of all of this code. It doesn't make sense for us to do it unless this storage code also leaves. And they agreed to that. And I'm going to say negotiated, but negotiated sounds a little adversarial, and there was no adversarial here. SIG storage was actually always a pretty good ally in this effort. We had a huge mountain of work to do, and they basically said, how are you planning on doing it? We described our plans. They went, hey, that sounds like a really good idea. do you mind if we keep this, but we're going to do the CSI stuff and we're going to build a lot of, reuse a lot of your rollout and other mechanisms to do the same thing that you're with the CSI that you're doing with CCM. And how about we just coordinate with you and we get all of the code out? And that's what we did, and it worked pretty well. All right, why am I going into history? So up till this point, this sort of thing that you're describing has always sort of been left to SIG storage. I like what you're saying. I also like the relationship that we have with SIG storage. And so what I'm going to suggest is, while I like what you're saying, I think the thing to do is do exactly what we did last time. Let's arrange to reach with like Michelle or whoever the SIG storage leads are. I kind of lost track, I have to admit. And we go, hey guys, we see that there is a bit of inconsistency here where we, who are the experts on cloud provider consistency, think there probably should be more consistency. And we'd love to work with you to help fix that. And so that's going to be my suggestion, given the history, on where I think we should start. And I love your idea. I just think that there's a good way for us to start pushing on that. And that would be to actively engage the SIG storage leads with your proposal.
Yeah, no, I am part of SIG storage. I've been on SIG storage since like 110 or something like that. It's like 7-8 years. So I work with Michelle and Jan, who are SIG storage leads, right, on daily basis. So yeah, no, that's fair point. Jan has already seen the proposal, and Michelle has been reading the proposal as well. So we are still kind of like working, like discussing how it will work out. So that's a good point. And I think, yeah, I will get a concrete maybe decision on that, and I'll link the proposal that I have, and then we can go from there.
So like I'm happy to hear the history time, and I think it's good for us to kind of keep mind of how we got to where we are now. Yeah, I think like so with Hemant, like I want to help solve the short-term problem, and I also want to help solve the long-term problem. And I realize that like there might be some, there's going to be some dissonance between the two different solutions that come about, right? And I think you're right. Like we can't necessarily just wait for this grand solution that will boil the entire ocean. So I think like probably what we need to do is, yeah, start coming up with like some sort of enhancement that SIG storage and SIG Cloud Provider can agree on, where maybe we follow, what's already been done in the Azure CCM or something similar to it, right? Where we could allow some sort of, we could define some sort of optional or opt-in type of taint that cloud providers could choose to add through their cloud controllers, and maybe we can define kind of a way to do this, or maybe it needs to come from the CSI driver or something. But I think like coordinating between the two of us, like the two SIGs, will probably help us to come up with a better solution for this. And maybe it needs to live in the cloud controller, maybe it needs to live in the CSI driver. I think as we get deeper into the technical details, we'll understand that better. So I think we should probably start looking at, from your perspective in terms of wanting to get things done, like, yeah, I think like starting to come up with a draft enhancement around how this mechanism would work is probably a good place. And even if it's like a Google Doc to begin with, then we could start, at least discussing it between the two SIGs and trying to come to some sort of agreement. And if we ultimately take that to the node lifecycle working group as well, that might help to further the discussion there, also.
Yeah, that's fair.
Walter, yeah.
I'm going to quickly throw out, might be worth taking a little gander at the history of the failure, the failure domain taint. I think it is in some ways a similar taint, and it has some interesting history that I think is pertinent, including things like it was a cloud provider specific taint, and we had to migrate from the cloud provider specific version of the taint to what we wanted, which was a core common taint. And then I think we did a V2. So I'm just going to say, I think there's probably some lessons there in some of the ways that we make this a common taint and a good API.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, like I think we'll have a lot of reading to do on this one, or at least Hemant will. All right, cool. Any other questions or comments about this topic? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone unmuting or hands going up or anything, so we will move on to Lucas's topic about watch-based route reconciliation. So please, Lucas, take it away.
I wanted to talk about the watch-based route reconciliation topic I've brought up in the last SIG meeting, where we want to replace the fixed interval, which is currently used for the route controller, and replace it with a watch-based mechanism using informers, similar to the service controller and the node controller. I wanted to bring attention because in the pull request there, we have already some technical discussions ongoing with, I think Antonio was his name. And as far as I can tell, I think he's from SIG Network. And the discussion, yeah, it might be worth that someone from the SIG is having a look there. It's also my first contribution there, so I guess it would be cool to have an additional opinion there. In addition, we also started drafting a cap for this, because should probably be behind a feature gate, or at least this was also the decision in the issue, which is also linked here. And there, as this is also my first cap, I just kind of wanted to ask how the feedback process is with these caps. Me and my colleague, we started drafting the cap now in a Google Docs document, which is linked in the issue. And I just wanted to ask if it's like fine to do review there, or if we should open up a pull request with the Markdown README and have discussions there.
This is a deep conversation, but I will try and do the highlights. So first, really important, have you decided which SIG you're going to make the kappa in? Because you need a sponsoring SIG.
Yeah, in SIG Cloud Provider.
Okay,
so this would
cool.
change the route controller code.
That's fine, and I would have argued you could either do us or networking, but which one you do matters. I'm going to suggest there's a few things I'm going to say, and one of them is going to be a really odd message. The schedule for the next release hasn't been published yet, so I don't know what the dates are. But if the dates are what I think they are, I'm going to tell you you have about 4 weeks to get the cap approved.
So our plan was already to go with this for the next version, I think, because
not the one. What's our next one? 134.
133 should be the next one,
okay,
if I remember correctly.
I should think I would actually remember. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the cap deadline hasn't been scheduled, hasn't been announced yet, but I'm expecting it to be about 1 month from now. So you either have 1 month to get it done, or you've probably got about 4 months or 5 months to get it done, depending on what you're looking for. I would say to getting it approved, I'm selfishly thinking of myself, Elmiko, and Bridget here, but you need to get one of us, preferably all of us, to approve the cap. And our time gets less and less available the closer you get to cap deadline. So the more you can talk to us in sort of before those final week or two, the better off you're going to be. As a reviewer, and I'm going to leave Elmiko and Bridget to talk to themselves here, but as a reviewer, I would highly recommend a Google TLDR doc, which is basically I don't really want to overwhelm you. I want to introduce the concept nicely, and then I'll link to all the gross details of how we deal with all the edge cases. But I would say one of the things is provide a TLDR doc, and be nice to the reviewers. Start them on the TLDR doc before they have to go and read the actual cap. And that would be my recommendation. And then I will leave it to, and there's a lot more I could say, but I think that's the highlights. I will leave it to Elmiko if he has more he wants to add.
Well, the first thing I want to add is that you did miss the first point. Bridget had put a point about proposing Joel as another tech lead for the SIG. And I think Joel is, it sounds like he is interested and he's here. And, you know, Joel, I don't know, Joel, do you want to say anything or?
Not much to add right now.
Okay. Well, yeah. So like Joel, I would say in addition to what Walter said about reaching out to myself and Bridget and him, you can also reach out to Joel as well. But yeah, no, I agree with everything Walter said. I think getting a document going, getting something up in place so we can start reviewing it, and especially if you want to get it in for the next release, that's going to be really aggressive to get this reviewed and everything, at least the enhancement. I think the code is probably going to be a little easier, but yeah, +1 to what Walter was saying, basically.
And I will add, yeah, feel free to tag me on that as well. I'm happy to review.
All right, great. Then I will do so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Lucas. It's great to see more people coming to the SIG and getting involved in everything. So I'm excited to see how this goes. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our regular agenda. Does anybody have ad hoc topics they want to add before we check out the open issues? All right.
One quick plug. We didn't get a lot of people at the SIG Cloud Provider talk, but I will say, I mean, despite I don't think we had the best rating, but I actually thought it was a pretty good talk. I would recommend going and viewing it, at least for Elmiko and Bridget's portions. So, you know, KubeCon, like it is worth checking out. I think there were some interesting discussions about possible future directions and the state of the system. So.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out. And I'll go see if I can dig up a link after this, or maybe someone else can add it in there. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the shout out there. It was a fun talk for sure. Okay, so let's look at the open issues. I think we've already examined this one, so there's probably nothing really new to look at here. Yeah, I think this is, you know, probably just waiting for Wendy to take a look at it. Or I think we can actually just close this. Is this us? Okay. Given that everything is green currently, I think we can close this. I don't know if I have the ability to close it or not, but I will attempt to. Okay, and let's just to confirm what Ben was saying there, let's just look at the board and see how it looks. And yeah, as expected, the board is relatively green right now. Go back into history. Yeah, we had a couple things a few days ago, but that's it. All right, I think we're in good shape here to call it a meeting. So if nobody has anything else, yeah, let's take back 15 minutes of our day, and thank you everyone for coming out.